Class 4. All right, we are on Father Woodbury's Hierarchy of Values in Education, and the main reason for doing this is to show how philosophy works. I mean, we learn a good bit about education in the process, but the purpose of this is not so much to study education as great as this is. In fact, I just had an email from some professional educator who read Woodbury's thing in CFN and is begging me to release to give him a copy of the entire 22 pages that I took it from. I still have to think about whether I can do that or not because of the anyway. So this is really a brilliant exposition of education, but the reason it's so brilliant is because he is rooted in firm principles of reality. And so we saw that he starts with the principle of finality. Every agent acts for the sake of an end. And then the three corollaries that come from that, those which are unto an end. The first, those which are unto an end are only good in relation to that end. Second, the imperfect is for the sake of the perfect, the lower for the sake of the higher. The third, the part, is for the sake of the whole.
The carburetor.
The carburetor, or the triangle in the orchestra. And so we did all that last time, and we went through his outline. The first point being principles of reason. Second, what is human nature? Third, the three powers of human nature. That's as far as we got, right? Fourth, what is education? 5, the hierarchy to be observed in education. 6, physical education. 7th, religion and education. And 8, development of character. And at a later time, we might return, when we're doing philosophy of human nature, and you've had even more material, we might return to the points that are in this this work on education. But he has already established that the end of man is what?
Perfect happiness.
Perfect happiness. And and what is the only source of perfect happiness? God alone, because God is the source of the three things that we want. God, we want life, we want truth, we want love. Where does it come from? We don't have perfect life here because we die. We don't have perfect truth here because there's always a mixture of error, and we're always sorting out what is true and what is not here. And we don't have perfect love here because
we die.
Well, many people are disappointed in love. But even if you have a wonderful love and a wonderful marriage, sooner or later that comes to an end. The marriage vows say, "Till death do us part." All right. So we don't have life true. The things that we want the most, we don't have them here, but we have this desire for them. We have the desire for the good, and so man is drawn towards that good, which is God, even if he can't fully understand what this God is. But he is drawn towards perfect life, perfect truth, perfect love, which is a pretty good definition of God. And these are part of God's attributes, which we might study later when we get to natural theology. So, as the end of man, as man is possession of God alone, then all of man's powers, the vegetative life, the sensate life, and the intellectual spiritual life, are for the sake of possessing God. And he keeps pulling from this principle of finality that the parts are for the sake of the whole. The parts are for the sake of the whole. And that's why, people who live to eat, they're really just living on the level of a vegetable. Because what does the vegetable have? Nutrition, growth, and generation. What did I hear Philomena say this morning? That little joke. I eat when I'm depressed. I eat
because I'm sad. I'm sad because I'm fat.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, so there we are. So then, okay. So if all our powers are to be ultimately ordered in their proper hierarchy to achieve our final goal, then this is what's going to be the basis of determining what is education. And now we had known that St. Thomas says that education is the forming of the new man up to the point of virtue. Father Woodbury is going to take that and he's going to define it with a little more sharply. He's going to say education is the progressive and harmonic development of the power of a child by which he is transformed into a perfect man. You want to write that down?
Yes, could you repeat it?
Father Woodbury's definition of education, colon.
Father.
And you can see it is Thomistic. He's just adding some pointers to it.
Okay, you ready?
You all set? Education is, quote...
Education
is, quote, the progressive and harmonic development of the power of the child, or the powers, I think it should be, of the powers of the child.
Harmonic. The progressive and harmonic. What's the next word?
Development of the powers of the child.
Development of the powers of the child. Powers of the child.
By which he is transformed into a perfect man. Man, okay. Now, what do these words progressive and harmonic mean? Progressive today, he's using progressive not in the sense, progressive is usually equated today, progressive meaning liberal or left-wing or something like that. He's not using the word progressive that way. He's using it in this way, that it has to be progressive, it has to be incremental. You learn one little thing and then you build on top of that and you tamp that down and get it right, and then you build on top of that and tamp that down and get it right, and build on top of that and solidify yourself on that, on what you've learned, and then build on top of that. So progressive here means incremental. Okay, it's building. And second, it must be harmonic. And that is, it has to be, as he says, a development of the child's power in due proportion. Okay, the lower always subservient to the higher. So it has to be within this hierarchy. And in a way, we can see that the Suzuki method is thoroughly Thomistic. Because Suzuki, you're getting it incrementally. And in a certain sense, although I don't know that he quite means it this way, but we can look at it this way, everything is developed according to what the child can handle. The child starts out with his little up like a rocket, down like a rain, back and forth like a choo-choo train. And so most methods of education, any good method of education is always Thomistic, whether they know it or not, because it conforms to basic common sense. Because Thomism is what? What do we say? A detailed exposition of what we all know instinctively. Yes. So then, he just said about the forming of the perfect man. So then, what is a perfect man? Perfect man, according to Woodbury's definition, and according to everything we learned here, is one who possesses that goodness which man is destined by his nature to possess.
One who possesses that goodness. The goodness. The goodness which man is designed to possess.
Yeah. And we're going to see too, there could be a superficial way of looking at it. Well, man already said that God, that man reaches his ultimate end by God possess. So basically, Woodbury saying that the best way for man to the best thing that man can do is die, because no, he doesn't mean it that way. What he means is all three powers should be operating well in accordance with reason and in accordance with the hierarchy of order. So nutrition, growth, and generation, all the powers for nutrition, for growth, for generation should all be lived and understood in light of human reason. That's why I said this also goes to here, the sensate life, especially. The sensate life, the 5 external senses, the 4 internal senses, developed well, developed in the real world, an ear for harmony, an eye for beauty, and also all our appetites subservient to reason. There's a lot more we could say about this, but we'll probably deal with this more when we get to philosophical psychology. And then the spiritual powers being the highest powers, intellect and will. Intellect, we heard Father What's-His-Name say this weekend, intellect is made for truth, the will is made for goodness. The intellect is towards truth, the will is made for goodness, and the intellect also must be king and premier, as it were, over the will.
Okay.
So that's when he says, a perfect man is one who possesses that goodness which man is destined to possess. He's not talking about merely getting to heaven, which is not more than a merely, but you get the idea. It's the vegetative life, the sensate life, and the spiritual life, all lived and developed in their proper order, all developed well. All developed well, a good intellect, a good control of the appetites, all of these things, all developed well, and all for the sake of the higher good, which is the possession of God alone. So, he says, a perfect man is one who fulfills his duties. He fulfills his duties to God. He fulfills his duty to his family. He fulfills his duties to himself, to others, to civil society, and to the church. Okay, you don't really have to write all that down, but it's someone who fulfills his duties. And in fulfilling our duties, actually, that is what makes us happy. Because we do have a duty, because we have duties to others and we have duties to ourselves. We have duties to learn. We have duties to know more. We have duties to recreate, to recreate ourselves. And so this is what he says. Now, thus the end of education is the making of perfect man and someone who fulfills his duties. And he says again, he's always going back to these principles. Those things which are unto an end are not good save in relation to that end. This gives us the ultimate criteria by which we must judge whether an education is good or bad. It's the supreme rule and the sovereign law. Okay, so all things, those things which are unto an end, are only good in relation to that end. In other words, to put it very simply, anything in education that takes us away from developing a proper intellect, which takes us away from forming a well-ordered will, which takes us away from controlling our appetites, which takes us away from God, steering towards God, that will be an education that is bad, right. This, I've just described the problem with modern education.
Yeah. I know.
Modern education might develop certain things like
Math,
sciences, things that are important, things that are what? Things that are practical. I need math so I can get a job. I need science so I can get a job. There's nothing wrong with math and science there. You know, Aristotle loved it. What's his name? Sir Isaac Newton loved it. St. Thomas Aquinas loved it.
Euclid loved it.
Euclid loved it. Dr. Waters loved it. Dr. Waters said one time he wasn't feeling well. He was in England and he was sick. And he pulled out a book about mathematics. And he was reading the structure and the logic and theories of mathematics. And he said, I was thrilled of the order of it and of the beauty of it and all of that. So I'm not denigrating any of that, but the point is that math and science are developed so I can get a job, and also a well-paying job. Dr. White was really angry one time because they posted the salaries of the of all the teachers at Annapolis when he was there, and the math and science teachers, professors were way up in as far as salary, and Dr. White was the next to the lowest paid one there, because he was only teaching literature. Who cares about literature? How's that going to help you get a job? How's that going to help me run a tank? So, or shoot a gun, or fly a fighter jet. So, anyway, he says, an education is bad. I love this. All other values must be subordinated to the highest good. An education is bad if it produces clever writers, brilliant engineers, shrewd financiers, astute politicians, but not good men. So the lower must be subservient to the higher, and that has to be the key for what education does to keep us steered, at least oriented towards our good end. We're going to see too, when he talks about religion and education, it doesn't mean that every science has to be, you do your math now. John of the Altar had 5 pieces of incense, and Billy the Altar had 4 pieces of incense, and if one of them dropped off the table, how many were, things like that. We're not talking about religion permeating education that way, but it has to permeate in that nothing in the other education should damage our orientation to God. It's just very simple. Now, he talks about sports, physical sports. He calls them, it's a heading, sports. And here we are, we're here down at the vegetative and the sensate life here. The development of the vegetative and the sensate life, the animal nature. And he has 4 points in favor of education. He says the physical well-being of man is normally of great value to his intellectual and moral good. So if you have good, strong health, really, that actually, people say when I exercise and when I'm doing exercise, I feel better, I think clearer. You're in better health. So it's good for that. It helps with the formation of character for the development of a spirit of fair play. The British had that jolly good win. Beat the pants off me. Jolly good win. Jolly good. There has to be a spirit of fair play. There has to be a spirit of, through sports, you learn a spirit of, being magnanimous in the face of defeat. Not stomping off or not, sulking for 5 days or anything like that. So sport, properly ordered, will do that for us. I love this. This is a direct quote from Woodbury. I think you heard me say this before. The 3rd point, sports and athletics provide an innocent and harmless outlet for the animal energies of youth. Father McMahon tells me that he drives the boys. They have a lot of sports activities, not for the sake of sports itself, but for the sake of, at the end of the day, those boys are too dog-tired to get into any mischief. They just look at their bed
and fall on it
and crash. Yeah, they just crash. They're exhausted at the end of the day. And I saw, when I was there, I saw that those boys were, those boys, I think they have, 2 hours of hard sports every day, hard phys ed every day, running, and one guy was on the lawn doing push-ups and all this business. And then also, this is another thing that the 4th point is that sports are a good activity to prevent idleness, to prevent too much leisure. Dr. White says that both in mainly in Romeo and Juliet, one of the problems is you have families, the Capulets and the Montagues, who are too comfortable and have too much leisure. As Dr. White says, nobody works in this play. Nobody works in this play. The young men are just hanging around, the young women are just hanging around, and they get into fights in the street. And so sports is something that is a good Activity, as he says, innocently occupy the leisure hours and helps to prevent idleness. Those are the 4 points in favor of sports. But like a solid, clear-thinking man, Father Woodbury then gives the 4 dangers of sports. The 4 dangers, the 4 things to watch out for. That they, number 1, that sports and physical activity should not be put to such a length that they would interfere with the mental and moral education of the young. That the sport becomes paramount, and everything is subservient to football or that type of thing. The second thing is it should not cause the young people, again, to neglect the higher things of life. We're back for our first principle, the imperfect for the sake of the perfect, the lower for the sake of the higher. This is interesting. I really think this is interesting. An overindulgence of sport, he said, could lead to a weakness of character. Isn't that interesting? It does the opposite. A serious weakness of character consisting in this. The one is capable of serious effort only in such pursuits as brings pleasure with scarcely any power at all of sustained effort or self-denial for the sake of things that are good for their own sake, apart from pleasure or utility. I've got something spelled wrong here. In other words, I will only spend myself, I will only sacrifice myself, I will only push myself for the sake of this sport, which gives me an immediate reward. Glory on the field, or feeling that I'm so wonderful, and anything else that does not give me this immediate reward, I'm not interested in. I am not interested in putting any effort into it, and that's the danger of that type of thing. He says it's the danger of practical hedonism, that everything turns to be centered on the self. And fourth, he says sports can never take the place of mind, nor of moral strength, nor of morality, nor of religion. We're back again to the lower for the sake of the higher. So we've made this point. It can never be subservient. It must always be subservient to the 3 powers of human nature and not dominating. And this is what we see too in modern sports, that they get paid an incredibly amount of money, and because they're great at sports, they believe that there's some sort of entity, some sort of lowercase god, that they can do anything they want, they can act any way they want, they can be as arrogant as they want. Well, everything's inverted, and no one likes to be around creatures like that. So that is sports. He also talks about, what about then, in light of the principle of finality, every agent acting for the sake of an end, lower for the sake of the higher. What about co-education? Now, he's not talking about grade school, he's talking about high school. High school boys and girls between the ages of 13 and 17 shoved into classrooms with one another 8 hours a day. Is that a good idea? Might it be distracting? Here's what he says. Very interesting. He says between the ages of 12 and 17 it should be discouraged. And it's not for just prudish reasons. This is great. He says most often during this period, 12 to 17, it is during this period that the child's character is definitely oriented towards what is clean, upright, and honorable, or towards the contrary. That's why these years are the formative years. They're formative, and you can really be oriented one way or another. I know people who were disoriented in the high school years, and to this day, in certain areas, they're still high school boys. They're still high. They've never gotten beyond the dirty jokes. They've never gotten beyond the bad language. They've never gotten beyond the lower appetites just controlling them. And so you keep the boys and girls separate for that reason. Youngsters of this age have vivid imaginations. They have vivid imaginations. We all have at that age, but we don't have the moral habits and the strength to control the imaginations. And this is why non-co-education, what would you call all boy? It's actually it's a help to the young person in their formative years, as they're forming their intellect, as they're forming good moral habits, to keep that they don't have that fight on their hands, at least during the school hours, and they can form better habits. And he says, okay, and of course the bad imaginations take you to bad inclinations. All right, the victory of reason over the animal element in man is slowly won, and by an arduous fight. Who would jeopardize so capital a victory by forcing the issue when reason is at its weakest and its enemies are at the strongest? Okay, so that makes sense. So you don't force it before, and this is why these sex ed courses that are in schools, all these things, they are destructive, thoroughly destructive and perverting to young people. And of course, Barack Obama, the pagan, thinks they're wonderful. Okay, so, but it's disorienting young people. You really get to think, is he really that stupid, or is he just malicious? It's hard to know because he was formed so badly himself. And lastly, here, I think the last thing we'll be able to cover today is religion and education. The end of this is to form good men and to work ourselves to God possessed, to come to the possession of God, and to form good habits. Well, we'll get to that when we come to the development of character. Okay, to form these good habits in the development of character. Okay, but religion and education, he says, religion cannot, without religion, man cannot be good as man. At most, he says it again, I love this. At most, he can be good as an engineer, good as a carpenter, good as a soldier, or good at any occupation, but he cannot be good as man. So he has to learn the truths of the faith, practice the 3 theological virtues, the 4 cardinal virtues, in all walks of life, and formed in religious truth for the intellect, and formed in Christian morals for the will, for the training of the will. And he says here, because you can see that he's not ecumenical. He says, now in so speaking, I am supposing that the religious truth to be taught is Catholic doctrine, not heresy. There is no contradiction in God's revelation, and the only religious doctrine that one has the right to teach is Catholic doctrine. Doctrines opposed to this are false, and what is false has no right to be taught. I'm going to teach a history course that tells you that George Washington was born in 1920. Do I have a right to teach that?
No.
Do I have a right to teach that Abraham Lincoln was
a woman,
born a poor black boy in Italy in 1717? No, what is not true has no moral right to be taught. People will innocently, maybe not so innocently, they will teach things that are mistaken. They will be mistaken about certain things, and if they're mistaken, saying something that they genuinely believe to be true, they're not lying. They're not purposely twisting the truth, or twisting or misrepresenting the truth for the sake of some malicious end. That's usually the case of people who are in false religions. Most of the time, they really believe them to be true. So they're not lying. You would say they are in error. Because what is the truth? Did we go through that?
I don't think so.
Truth I'll just say it this way. The adequation of the intellect to the thing. These are my reading glasses. The reading glasses are the thing. I look at that, a little lesson for Father Buckley. I perceive that they are reading glasses, and then I form a judgment. Yes, they are reading glasses, and I assent to that judgment. And so there is a perfect conformity between my intellect and the external reality. That is the definition. That is really the proper definition of truth. If I would say that I'm holding these glasses and I'm looking at them and I say, these are my distance glasses. Well, I'm making a mistake, but I'm not lying. I might, from a distance, I might think they are my distance glasses. But I am not in possession of the truth, because there is not the proper adequation of my intellect to the external reality. We're anticipating something here. One of the things that the modernists did is they changed the definition of truth. They changed it to, Maurice Blondel changed it to
what I feel good about.
Well, a little more clever than that.
Oh.
The adequation of the mind to life. Now, in a certain sense, you could define that as being accurate, but you also could define it, and the way they define it is, since we talked about this before, since the life of a man is always changing, growing, moving from one thing to another,
dying,
then truth will also change in conformity to the way man changes over time. Supposedly, human nature doesn't change, but they have this idea that man grows and he does come to better understandings of certain things, but he could also hit the pits morally too, like we're living in our time. So they've changed the very definition of truth itself, and once you do that, there's nothing left. We'll talk about that another time. You change the basic definition of truth. You don't know anything, anywhere, anymore. You're done. You're finished. So, like Hazel Mote says, in my Church of Christ without Christ, there is only one truth, and that truth is that there is no truth. So, so anyway, the adequation of the intellect to life. That is the modernist definition, but the adequation of the intellect to the thing or to the external reality, that's the proper definition of truth. And that is why it is only the true religion that has a moral right to be taught. And if you're going to tell me that there is no church, there's only the Bible, and if you're going to tell me that Jesus Christ did not establish 7 sacraments, and if you're going to tell me that we should not be honoring our Blessed Mother, and that there is no such thing as a papacy, it's just the human inventions, well, the people saying that might truly believe it. And we can't have any judgment on what they think, but do they have the moral right to teach something that is morally wrong? No. Does anyone have the moral right to tell lies about you?
No.
Or lies about mommy?
No.
No one has the moral right. They might be mistaken and saying things that aren't true about us, but they have no moral right to do it to you, to me, to anyone else. And this is the basis of why people say, oh, you're Catholic, you have the only one true religion, you say you only have the right to be. Well, if it is true, then yes, there's only one religion that has the moral right to be taught, and all the other religions don't have a moral right because no one has the moral right to spread error and lies about anything, including how high the Empire State Building is. It's only 6 feet high. I saw it. I stepped on it. So anyway, that's it for today. We still have to do the
development of character.
The development of character, and that's a real. But you'll see what he's doing here. My point is, he's going from the general principles to the more specific, the more specific, the more specific. But what doesn't change?
The principles.
The principles, yeah. The principles don't change. And the principles have nothing to do with like how I feel, like whether I like that or not. Like whether I think it's awesome, or whether I think it's cool,
or offensive,
or or convenient, or like...
They don't know that big word.
What?
Convenient.
Well, they know it from Al Gore, an inconvenient truth. But anyway, but this is all tools, and as I said, we're doing this as a examination of education secondarily. Primarily, I'm showing you what?
The principles.
How philosophy works.
How
you start with these basic principles. Something from last time, can the principles of reason be proven?
No, because they're so obvious that they can only be demonstrated.
Right. Yeah, they're so obvious. They're so fundamental is the better word. They're so fundamental that they can only be demonstrated. And how do you demonstrate them? By showing the absurdity when you don't follow them. The example I gave last week of 5-year-old Benedict. There's an ice cream cone for you in the fridge, in the freezer, and there's not an ice cream cone for you in the fridge. That's a violation of the principle of non-contradiction, and even the 3-year-old will go, huh? Dr. Waters said there's this one. The part is... Well, there's another one. The part is for the sake of the whole. There's another way of saying it. The part is not equal to the whole. That's a principle of reason. And his 5-year-old or 4-year-old niece said, Uncle Ray, will you cut this apple for me? So he cut the apple in half. He cupped it. Did you remember the story? He cupped it in his hand. He said, that's the whole apple. Where's the rest of it? He says, that's the whole. The part is just as big as the whole. And she said, put her hand on her hip and said, are you kidding? So even a 4-year-old understands the principle of non-contradiction. It is that beautiful phrase that Dr. Bennett says, the natural metaphysics of human intelligence. If you just let the intellect go. Dr. Waters said he always, you know who he loved talking to? Farmers. He loved talking to farmers because they had their feet flat on the ground. They were knee-deep in reality and cow droppings and all of that. And they were he says they were much more in touch with reality than many professors that I worked with who had absorbed modern philosophical notions, who say we can't know anything and we don't know how much is coming from the outside and coming from our head, and they get all confused. He says, you never hear a farmer talking like that. A farmer says it's going to rain, and oh look, it is raining. And my cow's dying, and my pigs need to be fed, and you're just immersed in reality. And so he loved talking to farmers. This great, one of the greatest philosophers of modern times, loved talking to farmers because they are hooked into, completely connected to reality. So that's it for today.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I thought we would get through all of this Dr. Woodbury today, but we didn't. So there we are.
That's okay. I don't mind working on Dr. Woodbury because it's amazing.
Well, another thing this will do is as you get older, it'll give you the ability to read books on Thomistic philosophy because you'll know the terminology. It won't be. I remember the first time I studied St. Thomas de Deo Uno, I went into it without having any background, and it was a disaster. It was a disaster. This is recorded by Oltyn Library Services, OLTYN, Oltyn Library Services. All rights reserved. www.oltyn.org.